Hi, this is Mark of the Wicked Edge Expert Corner Group, and this is another edition of Sunday School Knife Talk, and I want to continue talking about sharpening uneven and single-sided ground knives. And we've been talking for a few videos in other shows. I've been trying to take you through my experience as I learned how to sharpen my Japanese knives. Some of them are single-sided, some of them are asymmetrical sided, some of them are 50-50 grind, V grinds. There's a variety in Japanese knives, and these knives get sharpened differently depending upon the knife shape. And there are descriptions, ratios that we've been taught, that we've come to learn, that we've oversimplified, that are supposed to be the direction or the roadmap to sharpeners of how they should sharpen a knife. See, knives are described as a ratio. There's ratios, there's a single-sided knife, whether it be left hand or right hand, and then there's the double-sided knives. The double-sided knives may be uneven grind. So they distinguish those grinds by things like 90-10, a ratio, 80-20, 70-30, 60-40, 50-50. All these ratios that get put in the knife catalogs, and we look at them, that we see that number that says it's a 70-30 knife or an uneven grind. And that 70-30 is supposed to indicate to us, so I've been shared this definition, this explanation of what it means. We've all been shared this. I've passed it on. I've tried to teach it. I've tried to understand it. I've tried to explain it. This ratio, 90-10, is supposed to be that you sharpen most of your effort on the 90 side and only 10% of your effort on the 10 side. And an 80-20 is the same, 80% of your effort and 20%. The 70-30 the same, 70-30. But the numbers, these 70-30s, they are supposed to be telling us that the man that made this knife ground it to specifications, to a characteristic shape, that when you go to sharpen it, you need to sharpen it 70% on one side and 30% on the other, or 80 and 20, or 60 and 40. The guy that's grinding the knife is grinding the knife the way he's grinding the knife. He doesn't think about, I'm grinding this knife to 70-30, and I'm grinding this knife to 80-20, so the buyer down the road from some importer, when that guy buys it and reads it, he knows exactly how to sharpen it. It doesn't match like that. The roadmap we're given, the ratios, 90-10, 80-20, 70-30, 60-40, 50-50, they don't, how can I say it? They don't represent reality. The guy grinding the knife doesn't know that reality. He's doing what he's doing. He's grinding it to a profile, to a knife shape. Maybe one side is different. And he's doing all them that way, but he's not doing it in a 70-30, 80-20 specification. He's just doing what he's doing. It's the knife importers and the knife sellers that are assigning these numbers to indicate that these knives are ground differently. And that's correct. The 90-10 is more steep than the 80-20 or the 70-30 and the 50-50. You know, one side is almost straight, the other side is barely sharpened. So the grind, the height of the bevels, the shape, it is observably different from left to right, observably different. But the difference between 90-10, 80-20, 70-30, 60-40. That difference is not scalable like the ratios suggest. The ratio suggests numbers, definite numbers, 90-10, 80-20, with delineations that are described by the ratios, but the reality is the knives don't necessarily follow that kind of ratio. So these numbers are more of a guide that the 90-10 is very close to a single-sided knife. In fact, I would argue, excuse me, let me show you. I would argue on a single-sided knife that you do 90% of your effort on this side and 10% on the back side to deburr and flatten, because when you sharpen the front side, it affects the back side, just like a 50-50 grind knife. So 90-10 would be a good way of describing the effort. And I could understand 80-20, a good way to describe the effort. But it's not a representation of something physical that you can say, that's an 80-20 knife, or that's a 70-30, or that's a 60-40. You can't look at it like that. It's not labeled, it's not numbered. These are just guidelines, suggestions of what it is, and they've been taken by people like myself that wants to make these hard and fast rules, generalizations. Somebody wants to be told, most of us that are coming to here, we would like to be told by someone with experience before us how they did it, so we can try to replicate their process and have the same positive results. We're looking for ways to be told how to do this. And there's so much variance between the knives because, first of all, they're handmade. And second of all, it's not set in stone. It's not machined repeatedly one after the other, so they're all perfect clones. If they were perfect clones, you could say this is a 70-30 because they're all perfect. But they're not. A 70-30 by one knife maker may be a little bit different left to right in the proportions of that 70-30 grind made by a different knife maker that makes the 70-30. And within the same maker, because the knives are individually made, they're belt ground and handmade, there is variations. In Japanese knives that are handmade, no two are exactly alike because they're handmade. So these hard and fast rules can apply. The generalizations do, and that's why I'm trying to explain and make sense of the generalizations, so that when somebody throws the number at you, that you have an idea of what to do. It's not so much a roadmap that you set the dial 10% here and 90% here and go to town. It's an interpretation. An interpretation that the knife sharpener, in most cases, has to make on their own, because the knives just get dropped off and wrapped in towel and nobody really tells you what it is. They just expect that you know by looking at it how to sharpen it. Hence, Sunday school knife talk, because it's more complicated. So, when I got my knife, to step back to the other videos, I bought the 70-30 left-hand knife to compare it with the right-hand knife. I unboxed it to my surprise and dismay, and pleasure both. Pleasure because I got the answer. Dismay because it's not a mirror image like I had hoped it would be. See, I wanted to stand here and say to you, without owning a left-handed knife, I wanted to be able to stand here and profess that left-handed knives are a mirror image of the right-handed knife, and you just do the same thing that you would do on the right side, just do it oppositely. Well, that holds very simply for a right-handed knife that's a single-sided knife compared to a left-handed knife. It's very easy to make that statement. But with the uneven grind, asymmetrically ground knives, the hard and fast rules don't hold. And then when I got the left-handed and the right-handed, and I found that they are ground similarly, the 70-30 is offset to the same side, but the right-handed and the left-handed distinction is strictly in the way the edge, the bevels are sharpened, and the ratio of the height of those bevels. So it threw me all out of whack, because if it was a mirror image, I could say very easy, yeah, it's a mirror image, but it's not. So there's interpretation, so it's more complicated. When I came up with that, then I started thinking, well, what do these ratios mean? And I sent an email off to a guy that I've known about for years. His name is John Broida, and he has a YouTube channel. He has a knife import company in California called Japanese Knife Imports. I have yet to purchase a knife from him, but I've watched his videos for many years, and I like the way he explains. He's a freehand sharpener, and I study these freehand sharpeners just like I study you guys that are sharpening on your belts when you share your difficulties and you share your successes. I try to learn because I'm a student of sharpening. I just choose to sharpen with a fixed position guided knife sharpening device. So I'm trying to take these lessons from the freehand knife sharpeners and make sense of them so that I can explain how to adopt those sharpening processes to a fixed angle sharpening system where we do one side at a time and the other side and alternating, and we tend to count and we tend to do things real simple, mechanical, make sense of it. But now the hand sharpening, the offset for the steering and all that, it just makes it more complicated. So I wanted to discuss the 80-20, and when I asked him about it, he told me that it's not BS, like BS that it just doesn't matter, but there's a disconnect. He said there is a disconnect between the man grinding the knife and the description affixed to that grind. He says it is inconsistent. There is some latitude there, and that you can't quite make a rule out of that because one maker's knife is different than another and the variances within the same maker. So the ratios, 80-20, 90-10, 70-30, they are just to indicate to you that that knife should be looked for an unevenness, and it is sharpened differently from left to right. You will have to look at it and figure it out. The bottom line is we're looking to make a keen intersection between the plane on one side and the plane on the other side, whether they're V ground or single-sided or whatever, just that keen connection between one bevel and the other. We're doing the same thing, just the thought process is different. Just the 80-20 is supposed to be telling us how we go about it, the 90-10 and the 70-30. But the guy that made the knife doesn't know that that's what we're doing. He just knows that it's different, and when you look at it, you want to look at what he did, and you want to try to emulate the sharpening style to get the same bevel heights like he did. So the bottom line is the best way to go about it, and I'm going to run out of time, is to match the bevels with the marker. Thanks.